Hello.
Good afternoon. I'm calling the January 31st meeting of the Tax Committee to order. We do have a quorum present. Thanks for being here, everyone. First item of business is asking Representative Norris if he'd like to make a motion to move the minutes for January 25th.
I would like to make such a motion, Chair Gomez.
Excellent. Is there any discussion on Vice Chair Norris's motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries and the minutes for January 25th, 2023 are adopted. So members, we have a couple of bills up in front of us today. The first is House File 721. Chair Stephenson, thank you for joining us. So this is changes to the and expanding the working family tax credit. Yep, that's what I'm going to. So before we hop into the bill, we've asked Mr. Williams to come and give us an overview of the Minnesota Working Family Credit. And so we'll go to that presentation and then call on Chair Stephenson to present his bill. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Williams. Thank you.
Chair Gomez and members, I'm Sean Williams from House Research. I'm going to give just a brief overview on how the Working Family Credit works and sort of the background behind the credit. So Minnesota established the Working Family Credit first in 1991. At that time, it was based on the Federal Earned Income Tax Credit, or the EITC. Initially, when the credit was established in Minnesota, the state credit was set to equal 10% of the federal credit amount. In 1998, Minnesota sort of decoupled from the federal credit and instead established its own credit parameters. And under current law, the credit is set to equal a percentage of earned income, which ranges from 3.9% to 12.5% of earned income under current law, depending on the number of children of the taxpayer. One of the rules in state law is that you need to be eligible for the federal EITC to get the state working family credit. Some exceptions that are in state law, however, are that childless individuals who are 19 to 24 can claim the working family credit, even though they are not eligible for the EITC. And there's a few individuals that are phased out of the federal EITCs that still qualify for the working family credit under our state formula, and those individuals are also eligible. The credit is refundable credit. We've talked about refundable credits before, but in the case of the working family credit, the data I have that's probably best is from tax year 2019, because there's kind of some weirdness with the pandemic related to wages. But in tax year 2019, about $40 million of the credit directly offset liability. That was the non-refundable portion, and $242 million was paid as a refund. I want to talk briefly about what earned income is and what it means to be a child for the purposes of this credit. Generally, earned income is either kind of compensation for employees, wages, salaries, tips, and other employee compensation, and then also net earnings from self-employment. So that's people that are self-employed can also have earned income for the purposes of the credit. A qualifying child for the purposes of the credit means a child, the descendant of the child, or a sibling or a step-sister sibling of the taxpayer, or the descendant or a sibling of of the sibling of the taxpayer. To qualify, the person has to have the same principal place of abode as the taxpayer, and must be either 18 years and younger or be a student 23 and younger. And also a qualifying child cannot be someone who filed a joint return. This has some data, and I'm not going to sort of read through this directly, but this sort of compares the parameters for the working family credit. So you see the maximum state working family credit ranges from $295 to $2,646. This data is for tax year 2023. And the phase-outs vary. The sort of income at which it's fully phased out varies from $24,000 to $60,000 or so, again, depending on the number of children of the taxpayer and then also whether or not the taxpayer is married. This graph sort of describes the shape of these tax credits for people. So you can see that you get a larger credit based on the number of children that you have, qualifying children for the credit, and then also the phase-outs are higher. The phase-outs displayed in this graph are for married joint taxpayers. The phase-outs are a little bit less. They're about a few $1,000s less for unmarried individuals. This graph just shows that the biggest group of claimants of the working family credit are individuals with one qualifying child. That was in tax year 2019. And this slide is mislabeled. This is data for 2019. It's 31% of claimants had one child, but most of the money goes to individuals with 2 or 3 children. So it's 36% went to people, taxpayers with 2 children, and 32% went to claimants with 3+ children. You can also see here that a large number of the claimants were childless, but those childless claimants represented a fairly small share of the total dollars going to the credit. And if you go back to this graph, you can see that the credit for childless individuals is much smaller than for individuals with children. So that's the background I provided on this. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Members, any questions for Mr. Williams before we move on to our bill? I'm not seeing any. So thank you so much for that, Mr. Williams. And Representative Stephenson, welcome to the Tax Committee. So I'm going to move that House File 721 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. And with that, we'll turn it over to you. Representative Stephenson, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to be back in the Taxes Committee. It's unfortunate that I wasn't able to join you in your membership this year at the same time, though, as the best committee in the House. The
Whoa,
Commerce
whoa,
Committee.
whoa.
Do I still get to present my bill?
Next.
The bill that I have before you today expands the working family tax credit. And I think Mr. Williams just did an excellent job talking about this program, how it works. And I'd just like to say a little bit about why I think it's an important program and why I think it's deserving of expansion. Like I think a lot of people in the room, I spent most of the summer and fall out talking to folks at their doorsteps. And, among the conversations that really stick with you, I think, is when you run to someone who's really struggling. And I had a lot of conversations that were all the same, where people would say, boy, I'm working really hard. I'm trying. I just can't. The numbers aren't adding up. It's not working. And the working family tax credit is a phenomenal tool to help people who are in that situation. It's one of the best tools we have in government, both at the state and federal level, to reduce poverty and to help people who are working, who are earning income, who are doing what they can, for whom things aren't working out yet. So we expand the working tax credit in this proposal, both in terms of eligibility and in terms of the amount of the credit. But with particular focus, and I'm glad Mr. Williams kind of finished by noting that there's a lot of people who don't have kids who claim the working family tax credit, but they constitute a very small amount of the actual amount paid out under the credit. And if you look at the graphs that show how the thing works currently, you can kind of see why. The eligibility is reduced and the benefit is sharply lower than for comparable incomes with kids, which on the one hand makes total sense. I mean, we want to make sure the parents are able to take care of their kids. But I just will tell you that, again, kind of thinking back to my door knocking experience, and I'm sure a lot of members can relate, there's a lot of people in their 50s, maybe they have grown kids now, but they're struggling, they're hurting right now, and I don't want to leave them behind. So the biggest increases, both in terms of eligibility and in terms of benefit, are in that area. We did get a revenue estimate back, and Madam Chair, I have to tell you, I feel like a bit of a failure, because this bill is not expensive enough, as it turns out. We had a number in mind when we put the parameters together, and the good people at the Department of Revenue tell us that we were not ambitious enough. And I just would encourage you, as you think about putting together your tax bill, Madam Chair, to think about doing a better job with this bill than I did, would be my request. So.
Thank you, Representative Stephenson. I think that we're going to find a lot of great ways to help out working families in our tax bill, so appreciate you bringing this tool in front of us. Okay, so thank you so much for that, Representative Stephenson. We have a few testifiers before we move to member discussion. First up with us, welcome back to the Tax Committee, Nan Madden. Please introduce yourself and go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and thank you so much for Representative Stephenson for bringing this bill forward to expand the working family credit. My name is Nan Madden. I'm director of the Minnesota Budget Project. The Minnesota Budget Project is a nonpartisan program of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and our mission is to identify and advance public policies that make Minnesota a place where everyone can thrive, regardless of who they are or where they live. Minnesota's working family credit makes our tax system more fair, supports working people to succeed in the workforce, to better afford their basic needs, and to get children off to a strong start. 31 states, including Minnesota, as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, have credits like the Working Family Credit that are based on the federal Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC, and build on the EITC's documented success in supporting work, reducing poverty, and improving health and education outcomes for children. As you've heard, about 400,000 Minnesota households with modest incomes benefit from our current Working Family Credit when they file their income taxes. The Minnesotans who receive the Working Family Credit live in every part of our state, and I've provided the committee with 2 handouts that show in map and table form the importance of the Working Family Credit to folks in every county in our state. Currently, more than 15% of all Greater Minnesota income tax filers receive the Working Family Credit, and about 13% of Twin Cities filers. By boosting the incomes of Minnesotans trying to get by on lower wages, the Working Family Credit makes it more possible for them to succeed in the workforce because they have more resources for things like getting to work, education and training to build their skills, or work boots or other kinds of equipment. With today's tight labor market, we can't afford to have potential workers sitting on the sidelines because they have financial challenges in getting to work. Credits like the Working Family Credit also have a multiplier effect in our local economies when lower-income Minnesotans have more to spend on groceries, diapers, rent, and other basics in their local communities. Because it boosts the incomes of workers earning lower wages, the Working Family Credit can also contribute to narrowing racial disparities and economic well-being. People of color and Indigenous people in Minnesota are disproportionately likely to be earning low incomes due to structural and historic barriers to economic security. The changes on this bill build on the past work of this committee to increase the positive impact of the Working Family Credit and make sure it works for different types of families, including those folks without dependent children in the home that Representative Stephenson lifted up. And a lot of what's going on in this bill is trying to equalize the formula of the Working Family Credit so families of different sizes and configurations are treated more proportionally. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify today and for the committee's consideration of how Working Family Credit expansion can contribute to making Minnesota a state where everyone can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Madden. And if you look at one of these documents that Ms. Madden referred to does have basically like runs for the Working Family Tax Credit for every county. So go ahead, you can check out your own county there. We appreciate you sharing that information with the committee. All right, next up, welcome to the committee, Anna Odegaard. Welcome, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Anna Odegaard. I'm the director of the Minnesota Asset Building Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of 135 nonprofit organizations supporting asset building opportunities for low-income communities. About half our member organizations serve the metro area, and about half of our members serve Greater Minnesota. You can find our member list in your packets. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify in favor of House File 721, and thank you especially Chair Gomez, Representative Stephenson, and all of you who are working hard for a Minnesota with a more equitable tax code. An increase to the Working Family Credit is a top priority for our member organizations because it's critical to the financial well-being of individuals and families we work with all across the state. MABC member organizations are primarily direct service providers, helping Minnesotans achieve housing stability, employment, and transportation, and to meet their basic needs. Some of our members are focused on serving particular immigrant populations. Some are focused on the unique barriers facing Minnesotans in rural Minnesota. Some are really focused on serving high-risk youth, and others specialize in particular kinds of services like helping individuals launch small businesses. About 20 of our member organizations offer free tax preparation through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, or VITA program. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, the VITA volunteers prepare tax returns for low-income taxpayers and ensure that their clients claim the credits they're eligible for, such as the Working Family Credit. Many of these same organizations provide other financial services, such as financial counseling or credit building or just basic family budgeting. Because they work so closely with their clients at tax time, our members that provide VITA services have direct understanding of how important the working family credit is to families in their communities. This credit helps low to middle income Minnesotans catch up on bills, make important purchases, and save for the future. As an asset building coalition, we encourage our clients to build an emergency savings account to prevent small economic setbacks from snowballing into financial crisis. And tax credits like the working family credit are an important opportunity for these families to save. However, many of the individuals our members work with have depleted their savings, especially during those early months of the COVID epidemic when so many families lost all or part of their income. In fact, many of our member organizations shifted some of their resources to expanding their food shelf services in 2020, just to meet the basic needs, the increased needs in their community. Although many families have begun to recover from the toughest pandemic months, the high inflation of the last year has made it difficult for them to make the shift back to savings. Thank you so much for recognizing that the Working Family Credit is a critical contributor to family budgets, both for those still catching up from the tough months of the pandemic and also for those eager to save for a brighter future. Increasing the maximum credit and expanding the number of eligible taxpayers is a direct investment in family and community prosperity. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much. Before you leave, I know that Representative Swedzinski had a question. I don't know if it was for the testifier or.
Maybe for whatever, yeah.
Okay.
You want to take questions now?
Well, if it's for Ms. Odegaard, then yeah, but if it's just sort of a general, maybe we'll wait till we just have one more testifier.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We appreciate all your work. Thanks for being with us today. All right, another testifier, Katie Schultz. Welcome to the committee. Thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gomez, and thank you, members of the Tax Committee, Chair Stephenson, for giving me the opportunity to speak in favor of House File 721. And my name is Katie Schultz, and I work at the nonprofit Prepare and Prosper, and I am excited to just speak in favor of this bill and also more broadly expansion of the Working Family Credit. I know a lot of you are familiar with Prepare and Prosper as an organization. We support financial well-being with volunteer-based financial coaching and accessible, safe banking and credit building services. Prepare and Prosper also leads the largest volunteer income tax assistance program in the state of Minnesota. And through the work of hundreds of volunteers, we assist thousands of taxpayers each year with filing accurate tax returns and saving millions of dollars in tax preparation fees. And in addition to that, Prepare and Prosper also helps families claim all the tax benefits that they're eligible for. Because our work focuses on low to moderate income families, more than half of the filers that we serve claim the Working Family Credit. And so as an example, I was working at one of our tax sites last week. We just launched our tax season, and I worked with a woman who made just under $13,000 to support herself and her son. And she was able to claim just over $1,100 in Working Family Credit. And as this person discussed her refund plans with Prepare and Prosper volunteers and myself, she shared with us that she's planning to put some of that money into savings this year. And this is a point in time when she's able to do that. And she's not sure what expenses are coming up during this upcoming year, but she wanted to put part of that refund aside, as she does every year, to focus on the future and think about whatever may come up. And this gives her some additional financial security. And anecdotes from my work over time, I worked at Prepare and Prosper for over 10 years now, shows that taxpayers are using their refunds in a variety of different ways. And this might be to buffer their financial situation by adding some savings or to shore up their financial situation. So this might be immediate needs, something like catching up on bills or paying rent that's behind due, or it could be essential spending like car repairs or medical treatment. But I also see people that are taking this money, kind of a financial windfall that's coming during tax time, and using that to pay toward the future. So thinking of education for their children, or thinking of buying a home or a vehicle that could secure them safe transportation. So I think the bottom line is that the Working Family Credit has a large impact on people's financial well-being, especially our low to moderate income families in Minnesota. This might help them meet day-to-day expenses or have an opportunity to put some funds aside for the future. And increases to this credit will give families a bit more financial choice and build in financial security for those who have narrow margins to work in. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak to this, and looking forward to seeing how this committee puts working family credit into a new position in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Schultz, for being with us today, and for all of your work over the years at Prepare and Prosper. We know that these sites that help low-income people file their taxes serve a really important public purpose, and we thank you for your work. That was the last testifier on my list. If there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to testify, please go ahead and come on up to the table. Oh, you're just getting out to let her in. Okay, cool. All right.
Courteous, Madam Chair.
Sorry?
Being courteous.
Right. We like people being courteous in tax committees, so we appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll move to member discussion. Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I've got a comment and then a question. I've been a longtime proponent of this tax credit. I think it's a real win-win for the state. I don't need to tell anybody that the cost of groceries and gas and everything else seems to be going through the roof. And so this is a way to put money back into the pockets of those lower income families in our state. And I'm sure most of you, like in my district, you go to the local businesses and you see signs taped on the door saying, closing early today because of short staff, or closed entirely today because of no staff. And so this tax credit also encourages folks to participate in our workforce. And so it really is a win-win. And so I'm really excited to see Chair Stephenson bringing this bill forward to us. My question, and I think it's probably best directed to Mr. Williams, just to clarify, people who are 65 plus, they don't currently qualify for this tax credit, is that correct?
Mr. Williams?
Chair Gomez and Representative Norris, that's correct. So we're tied to the federal rules for the working family, or for the earned income credit on this, and individuals ages 65 and older are not eligible for the federal earned income credit.
Representative Norris.
Thank you, Chair Gomez and Mr. Williams. So as we go ahead and look at how do we right-size this bill, I think that's one area that we might want to look at. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to partner with AARP to get unemployment insurance benefits for seniors on Social Security. And our seniors, our 65-plus population, is one of the fastest growing parts of our workforce. And so to the extent that we've got older folks in Minnesota who are participating in the workforce, it only seems fair that they should also be able to receive this tax credit.
Thank you, Representative Norris. And I'll just provide a little bit of other context on that last point from my time chairing the Preventing Homelessness Division. I was surprised to learn that seniors are the fastest growing demographic going into homelessness. And so what that speaks to is exactly what you just said, right? Which is, seniors who are on the margins economically in the face of those rising costs are really falling off the edge. So definitely want to continue that conversation about including some other folks in this bill. So thank you for that, Representative Norris. Representative Swedzinski's stepped out for a moment. We'll go to Representative Olson L.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Stephenson, for bringing this bill forward, and just appreciate expanding this and what we're doing, and especially the geographic impact of this bill, I think is really noteworthy, and want to just say I appreciate it. I just had a quick question. What's the current general fund impact of this bill? Does any staff know that?
Ms. Templin.
I mean, I'm sorry, not of the bill, of the current working, I just want to understand the change amount here is what I'm getting at.
Ms. Templin.
Chair Gomez and Representative Olson, the estimated revenue impact for the working family credit for for tax year 21 is $227.7 million. And for fiscal 22, the projected revenue reduction for this credit is $242.5 million.
Representative Olson, you good?
Thank you.
Our Ways and Means Chair, always keeping an eye on the bottom line. Thank you for that. Representative Weiner, or I'm sorry, Representative Swedzinski's back, so we'll go to him first and then to you next. Sorry, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had to step out and
Yeah, no problem.
call quickly. Just to, Representative Stephenson, just kind of looking at the bill, does it weigh either way from on the child care tax credit or the per child working credit or whatever this is? Could families use the finances to use a private school to help fund their enrolling their child in a private school if they needed help with that?
Representative Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Sosinski, we don't prescribe what people can do with their tax credit money, so
Sounds
it's
good.
up to them.
That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Representative Swedzinski, you good? Yeah, all right, Representative Weiner.
Madam Chair, thank you. Representative Stephenson, the question you had brought up, that the tax bill didn't go as far as you'd want, and a potential change. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Representative Stephenson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Weiner. You know, the revenue estimate came back at about 75 million a year, 152 million in the first biennium, 161 in the second biennium. And when I was putting this bill together, you know, my primary goal was to expand the credit for everyone, but particularly for people with no dependents. And then I was, you know, shooting for like the 250 on a biennium in terms of a price tag in my mind. So my suggestion to the committee, if you were inclined to be also wanting to devote $250 million a biennium to the tax credit, is to continue to expand, particularly for the people without dependents, particularly because I think that the odds are good, based on some of the other legislation I see moving around the Capitol, that we will do things to help parents afford the cost of childcare, afford health care, afford all of the other things that go along with it. And I don't want people who don't have kids to be left behind. So my suggestion would be to focus on those individuals if we were going to expand it further. But mostly I was just joking. I was just trying to say that I was a failure because I thought that was fun.
Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow-up question, and it kind of goes off what Representative Stephenson and Norris had said, is how does the tax credit compare to cutting Social Security, which has been discussed, I think, by Governor Walz and others, is cutting that? How would that, and maybe this is research. Social Security tax. Yeah, Social Security tax, I'm sorry. What would be the cost comparison?
I can turn it over to nonpartisan or to fiscal. But I mean, I can say, I think, well, we'll just go to you for the latest, because we have a new revenue estimate on a complete Social Security, a full exemption for Social Security, and then I'll maybe make a quick comment afterwards. So, Ms. Templin.
Madam Chair and Representative
Weiner.
Weiner, the cost per person, that information is not available right now, and it would depend on the proposal. But we do have information about Social Security exemption for an unlimited Social Security exemption. In that, the estimated revenue reduction per year is roughly about 600 to 700 million per year in the forecast biennium. And that's just the total revenue reduction. I do not have the number of taxpayers that claim that on their return, but I could get back to you with that information later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Templin. And yeah, so kind of in that $600 to $700 million a year range. You know, we're going a little outside of what's in front of the committee, but I appreciate the question. And, you know, we are going to have a discussion about Social Security taxes in the future in the committee. I guess what I would say is that, you know, one thing I know is that anybody who just receives Social Security and no additional income right now pays zero taxes on their Social Security. 55% of Minnesotans pay zero taxes on their Social Security. The working family credit really is, you know, focused on helping those families and individuals in the state who are kind of really the most economically challenged. It's really focused at the sort of lowest income working people in our communities. And so, the full Social Security exemption disproportionately goes to higher income Minnesotans in terms of the percentage of the overall cost of the bill that they receive. It goes mostly to the middle and higher income folks, and we'll talk about the specifics of that as the bill comes up. But just because, again, 55% of Social Security recipients right now pay no tax, that is where I suspect if you sort of did an overlap analysis of like who would benefit from an expansion of the working family credit, and they would almost disproportionately be people who pay no Social Security taxes right now. So next up, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a comment and then a question. I know we've moved a little away from the conversation already, but wanted to just dovetail the conversation about seniors. Something that we haven't talked a lot about is, we had an opioid epidemic, and a lot of grandparents actually started taking care of their grandchildren, and so I'm also, guessing that, this probably would be helpful to those families that are now kind of multi-generational. But moving on to the question at hand, also during COVID, we expanded the child tax credit and lifted historic levels of children out of poverty. And so I'm just wondering if the author or the witnesses here can talk about the impacts of what this bill would do long-term for children and for the state.
Thank you, Representative Lee. I'll ask Representative Stephenson. I think that at least one of our testifiers might have some comments to add about the impact of the working family credit on child poverty, though. It's a good question. So we'll go first to Representative Stephenson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Lee, I think both the earned income tax credit at the federal level and the working family credit have been among, if not the most successful programs in eliminating poverty at all levels, but including poverty for children. And it's one of the reasons why the federal program and the state program have often, if not always, enjoyed bipartisan support, because they work, and they work specifically to alleviate back-breaking, gut-wrenching poverty among people who are working and helping kids. So it's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to expanding this program, because it's proven to work and it helps exactly those people. But Ms. Madden can maybe give you some more specifics.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming back up, Ms. Madden.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Lee, for those comments and questions. I might first just mention on the issue of grandparents raising grandchildren, the exclusion in the working family credit to folks 65 and older only applies if they don't have a dependent child. So to the extent that grandparents have taken on that responsibility, they may benefit from the existing credit and as it would expand. I really appreciate you lifting up as well the child tax credit. I think the experience of the federal child tax credit and that just historic reduction of child poverty, over 50% during a pandemic, just really shows the power of these kinds of tax credits. And the design of this expansion proposal for the working family credit also tries to apply some of those learnings and the importance of getting people to the maximum amount of credit benefit at a lower income level. But we do, at the Minnesota Budget Project, we support a creation of a state child tax credit as well as working family credit expansion.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Representative Lee?
Well, thank you.
Great, thank you. And we will be talking more, I would imagine, about child tax credit when we hear the governor's bill, because that was one of the highlights kind of his tax package is a child tax credit that it's estimated would reduce the child poverty rate in Minnesota by 25%, which would be not quite as good as the federal one did, but really significant for us. So looking forward to that conversation in the future. Representative Koznick, did you have a question or comment?
If we have time, Madam Chair?
Absolutely, always for you. How are the mics working?
Not to my liking so well.
I know, we're gonna fix the audio in here to Representative Koznick's liking one of these days, I swear.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then we'll have karaoke.
Representative Stevens, I get to see you twice in one day, so.
And son.
Stephenson, and I'm sorry, I don't know why I always do that, so I apologize, and that was going to be one of my comments, but I messed it up again. I don't know why. Two things. When I was on the tax committee, I think my freshman year, the great chair of that committee was absent one day, and I was told to sit and grab the gavel and run the meeting. And the meeting was about the working family tax credit, so it was very interesting. I learned a lot that day as a freshman. And part of that discussion, it kind of like got out of my control as the chair of that meeting. But we had a good discussion, and there was a lot of discussion about the accuracy in claiming the credit. And I watched more senior members debate it back and forth quite heavily in that debate. And I'm wondering if there has been any progress in ensuring the accuracy of claiming the credit. Many of our members at that time said this was one of the most fraudulent or most abused credits in the system. And I don't know if staff has that. I didn't see that in there, or if the author familiar with any of that, or if we could, has there been any progress in making sure the accuracy of the credit is claimed? One of the things was like they might have a divorced parents. Both parents would claim the credit. Of course, they only have one child.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. I'll be sure to never ask you to chair this committee after you told me you let it get totally out of control, so noted.
Well, I can't get the author's name right, so it's probably a good idea.
We're going to go to Mr. Williams, but I expect this might be a little bit more in the department's realm, and so maybe we'll turn to him, but it might be a kind of a follow-up item.
Yep, and then I just had one other issue.
Great. Mr. Williams.
Chair Gomez and Representative Koznick, I guess I'd start by saying I know that there's been at least one GAO federal study about federal like fraud and misclaiming of the federal earned income credit, and I'm not sure if there's been follow-up reports on sort of the level of inaccurate claims or anything like that, but I could certainly follow up with you after committee about any more recent data if the GAO has followed up on some of their initial work in that area.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that would be fantastic. And then my other point is, it was mentioned with a couple of the testifiers, and we're all well aware of the high inflation of everything. And one of the things is we're looking at, the number of people that use this. How does the sales tax, I know we have, one of our lowest bracket in income tax is among the highest in the country. How does sales tax affect a lot of the people that use this credit?
Sales, okay. I don't know if that's do you think that's for Representative Stephenson? He might have some comments.
If he has some comments.
Others also might have some comments. Surprisingly, Representative Stephenson has some comments, so thank you.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee. First of all, I do want to note before we leave the earlier question, when Representative Koznick asked that question, Ms. Madden leaned over to me and said that she had a good answer to that question. I've learned that when Ms. Madden has thoughts, you should listen. So I would encourage the chair to call on Ms. Madden after I'm done opining. The thing I would note for Representative Koznick is that in Minnesota, we don't tax some of the, sales tax doesn't apply to some of the basic essentials of life, food, certain types of clothing. We know those are disproportionate amounts of poor people's budgets. And so when we're thinking about how these things intersect, it's probably good to keep in mind the disproportionate role that, for example, food plays in working families, poor families' budgets. But and Ms. Madden may have thoughts about this as well, too. I bet she does.
Great. Ms. Madden.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you, Representative Koznick, for those questions. To address the first question and issue you raised, I believe, if I remember correctly, that particular report was analysis that was done before a number of changes that were made at the federal level. And also, I feel there is some misunderstanding and kind of mixing together between mistakes and also kind of tends to confuse errors that were caught versus money that went out the door erroneously. We do know, as you mentioned, that the rules for who can claim a particular child in the earned income tax credit and working family credit are complicated for certain kinds of family situations, and It doesn't follow dependency in the same way, so it's easy for folks to get tripped up, and for two parents who aren't together, potentially each claim the same child, and that does tend to get caught at the federal level. And so just to name that, you know, the truth is that most people who have a mistake on their EITC probably got tripped up on these rules. On the issue of sales tax, you know, that's one of the powers of these income tax credits, is they can provide a targeted way for lower income people to offset some of the other taxes that they pay. So when we look at all taxes together, Minnesota's tax system is fairly proportional, and part of that is because credits like the working family credit can offset some of the sales taxes or other taxes that lower income people pay.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. We're going to just go to Mr. Williams, then we'll go back to you, Representative Koznick. If you have anything additional to add, Mr. Williams.
Chair Gomez and Representative Koznick, I was just going to suggest maybe taking a look at the tax incidence study for some of that information. So you can, they have both kind of distribution of sales tax by income, distribution of income tax, including these refundable credits. So that's, we talked sort of earlier in session about the bottom decile, couple deciles have a negative income tax liability, which partially offsets their sales taxes, property taxes, other taxes paid. And the tax incidence study will have data on sort of how specifically that works.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ms. Madden and Mr. Williams. I think that's good information, and I'll take a look at it. But I think the point is that the sales tax is regressive. We'll look at the certain percentiles, and so as the author pointed out, there are some non-taxable items to kind of offset those at the very lowest brackets. But my bigger concern is when we talk about inflation and we talk about the regressiveness of sales taxes, put a proposal like this and a program like this out, but then at the other side, we'll be hearing the governor's budget, where especially in the metro area, we have a proposal to raise the sales tax to further burden families. And it might not be families in this specific that qualify for this program, but it will affect families just above it. And I think there's a kind of a sense of hypocrisy, or, you know, we got one program doing this and one, you know, you're putting pocket money on one side of the pocket and taking money out of the other side of the pocket. And I think that's something that is troublesome, especially looking, you know, the county that I reside in, you know, 11.4% file for this credit. In Hennepin County, it's even a little bit higher at 13.2%. But the county we're in, Ramsey County, is almost over 18%. And so I think we have to be careful when we'll talk about the sales tax increase. Those are a lot of numbers, a lot of families that are impacted, whether they qualify for this credit or they're slightly outside of the income level. That sales tax increase kind of contradicts the intent, I think, of what this bill does. And we'll leave it at that, but I'll take a look at that and look forward to the GAO study on fraud, too.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I had a different topic in mind, but I guess Representative Koznick's comments just made me think. I think that sales tax proposal in the metro area is connected to transit, and I'll just note that so many working families, I mean, around the state, but then especially in the metro, are really dependent on transit. So we'll hear that proposal, but I just want to note that that transit is, in fact, a really key part of folks being able to get to work and school and places they need to get to. Maybe connected to that, the topic I had in mind first was to build on Representative Lee's questions about the impact on families. And I think this is to Ms. Madden in particular. I'm just curious, is there research, because I know there is in other areas that I work in, I would think that the money spent here, if you look at the health outcomes for kids, I mean, it's, you know, fewer low birth weight births and fewer premature births. We know the better educational outcomes, and there's like specific data and research on this. Has there been research done to show kind of what the long-term economic impact is on this? Because I wouldn't be surprised if, in fact, over time, besides the moral benefit of the dignity of work and everything else, if actually this kind of proposal ends up being a net positive, even just fiscally.
Ms. Madden.
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative Pinto, thank you for that question. My understanding is the research on credits like this or other kinds of mechanism that gets additional dollars in the pockets of low-income families, in addition to the near-term impacts that children who receive these kinds of credits do better at school and are more likely to go to college and earn more as adults. So it pays off in the long term as well.
Maybe just to
Yep, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just note, this is one of the four effective policies that have a strong research base that are urged by the prenatal, the 3 Policy Impact Center, again, getting back to early childhood, Madam Chair. As always, that have really urging states to have robust state EITCs, in our case, the Working Family Credit. And so thanks to Representative Stephenson, and thanks, Ms. Madden, for your work. Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I guess, I'll just add that, there's research from around the world about the impact on, participation in education and health outcomes and kind of all of the indicators of a good life that we would want for people, for direct cash transfers to families who are living in poverty. It's something that works and that evidence shows works. So thank you for that point. And lifting up the impact that this has on families and children. Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. Do you know the number of cases that have been reported that have been fraud? Obviously, you're investigating them. Some can be mistakes, but do we have a number of how many could have been fraud?
So, Representative Whitty, I suspect neither of the people at our testifying table have that information offhand. I think that's sort of related to the follow-up that we're going to get for Representative Koznick, both in this GAO study, and we're going to inquire with Revenue. I don't know that they have performed the kind of audit that we have at the federal level, but because our working family tax credit doesn't just mirror but directly uses that sort of info and eligibility on our form, it might get us an idea. But I'll go back to you, Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I reframe it?
Yeah, absolutely, please, Representative Whitty.
Are you guys able to determine that and then have the cases, obviously for us at another time, that there's a unit that is looking at it and can come up with that data?
Well, just to clarify, Ms. Madden's from the Minnesota Budget Project, which is an outside nonprofit organization. I think that question might be for the Department of Revenue. I don't know if, Ms. Bears, if you could come up and share some information with Representative Whitty. Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joanna Bears. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Revenue. And Madam Chair, Representative, that's a really good question. So a lot of our working family credit is tied to the federal. So we would look at the federal and to see what the errors were made there. But when you look at fraud, you have to look at, was it intentional? Because there's where you can make mistakes. A lot of, we do have our own criminal division. If we see fraud, that we would pursue those cases. But I don't know if we'd have the statistics on specifically fraud itself or if it would be a mistake. But we can look to see if there was errors made, and I can get you that number.
Thank you, Ms. Bears. Representative Whitty.
Thank you. I guess I was looking at if there was a unit to look at that and then how they go about it. So you answered that question. Thank you. And then one last question.
Of course, yeah. Representative Whitty, go ahead.
I appreciate your comments about Representative Stephenson. I got it right.
Good job.
Yeah.
It's the better side of Lake.
Hopefully that is recorded. But I appreciate your comments about door knocking. I saw that too when I went door knocking. The families that are struggling, inflation at a 40-year high, people they're wanting help. And the grandma that I'm sitting on her stoop and she's crying and talking about that. And then also what Representative Norris said, what can we do to help them out? And even Chair Gomez, I'm very proud of what we did with the conformity bill to help taxpayers. But I hope we start looking at it, because I think all of us, Republican, Democrat, governor, all talked about we're one of 13 states that still have a tax on Social Security. And how can we help all Minnesota families? So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. And but I saw it too, and I'm glad you brought the human side to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Whitty. Looking around to see if there are any further member comments or questions. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Stephenson, Chair Stephenson. This might be more for Mr. Williams, but my looking at the data showed that the current level of our working family credit shows us to be in like the top 8 nationally in terms of the generosity of the benefit. How will this expansion move us up or down in that ranking? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. Mr. Williams.
Chair Gomez and Representative Robbins, I'm not sure exactly how this would move us in those relative rankings. I think it's accurate to say we have one of the more generous working family credits by state, but I don't have that data right in front of me in terms of where we rank or how this proposal would affect that. So that's something I can certainly follow up with.
Great. Thank you, Representative Robbins. Any further discussion or comments from members? Yeah, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question just provoked this thought which is that, our state has some of the very best outcomes in terms of livability, in terms of health outcomes, the conditions. So I guess I'm not surprised we have one of the most robust of these tax credits, and could imagine this could bring it up even more. I'll also know that we also historically have had one of the strongest economies of any state in the country. And so I think we have an approach to things that has worked really well. And I just can't think of any reason why we would not want to, keep on doing that, because it's having great effects both economically and also in terms of the life outcomes for families. Anyway, just thanks so much.
Thank you, Representative Pinto. And Representative Weiner.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stephenson again. You had said before about changing the bill. Would you consider it and increasing it? Because exactly what was said already. Inflation. We're looking at 9-10% inflation. 2 of the counties in my area have the highest percentage of household. I mean, we're in the top percentage of this. How could we change that? Would you be willing to change that on the bill?
Representative Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative, yeah, I think one of the questions that this committee will have to decide as you assemble your tax bill is, where does this fit into the broader spectrum of what you're trying to do? And I would certainly encourage, I'm not a member of this committee, so I don't get a vote, but I would encourage you to include as much of an expansion of the working family tax credit as you can afford. This is a program that works. It gets results, and it helps people who are struggling. What's not to like about that? I think we should be, to hear that this is one of the biggest working family programs in the country, that's wonderful, because that means that we're doing something that works more than anybody else. That's great. Let's do more of what works.
Thank you, Representative Stephenson.
Thank you.
All right. One last look around. All right, with that, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you to the testifiers and to the members for a great conversation about this tax credit. With that, House File 721 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. All right, our second bill up today, Representative Youakim, welcome to your committee. Would you like to move that House File 705 be laid over for possible inclusion in a future omnibus tax bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to move that House File 705 be moved before the committee to be laid over for possible inclusion in a future tax bill.
All right, thank you for that motion, Representative Youakim. Please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Chair Gomez, and members. Thank you for hearing House File 705 today. This bill is pretty simple. It requires the Minnesota Commissioner of Department of Revenue to prepare a report on what it would take to provide a way for Minnesotans to file their Minnesota state income taxes online for free. The Department of Revenue would prepare a report that would detail what that process would cost, including vendor capability, security, and accessibility. Currently, Minnesotans can use certain tax preparation products to file online for free if they meet certain income requirements. This report would take a look at what it would cost the state of Minnesota to enter into a public-private partnership with some of those same vendors to provide all Minnesotans the same free service. We ask Minnesotans to pay taxes, and I would like to make that process just a little bit easier. Monetary resources are required to file and pay income taxes online using an intuitive software program that helps you walk through the process. Since the majority of Minnesotans are filing their taxes electronically, I've had constituents contact me why they cannot find free resources available to help them file online. Filing taxes electronically is quicker, it's easier, it leaves less room for error. It also provides for easier audits and increased security for filers, keeping the federal income tax and state forms linked electronically. This bill appropriates $175,000 to fulfill this task because it's a little complicated to gather all the information, requires a report back to us by January 15th of 2024. This is a project I embarked upon probably 6 years ago now with a former Minnesota Department of Revenue Assistant Commissioner, Terry Steenblock. She has since left the Department of Revenue, but still is working in the tax administration field at a federal level. And you have a letter of support in your packets from Ms. Steenblock. I also have Director Eric Harris Bernstein here from We Make Minnesota to testify in support of the bill as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Youakim. So we'll move to testifiers now. Eric Harris Bernstein from We Make Minnesota, if you could come up. Welcome to the committee. Thanks for being with us today.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, my name is Eric Bernstein. I'm director of We Make Minnesota, which is a coalition of labor and community groups united in support of a strong budget and equitable tax code that adequately provides for the demands of an inclusive and functional society. Thank you for the opportunity to share my support today for HF 705, which would allocate funds for a DOR study to explore the state's options for creating a free digital tax filing system for Minnesota taxpayers. I love this idea, and I really hope the committee will act on it this year. I don't normally come here advocating for effective tax cuts, but that's how I view this. Tax filing in the U.S. is an onerous and costly process, and a lot of other countries do it much better. According to the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, at least 36 other countries use a return-free system that is not only cost-free but effort-free as well. The government sends you a pre-filed return based on the data they have. You adjust it and then approve it. We could do that here, or at least help make it a lot easier. Instead, Minnesota filers are forced to compare a wide range of private sector tax filing providers, locate their scattered tax forms, and then pay to file. According to the IRS data from 2019, 1.5 million out of 2.8 returns in Minnesota were filed by a paid preparer. So I cross-checked that this year. TurboTax is going to charge $89 for a federal return and $49 for each state return. And more complicated returns go up from there. So if we just assume that base cost, that amounts to an effective $200 million tax hike on Minnesotans, with all the proceeds going to private companies. There are other even uglier aspects of the for-profit tax filing industry, such as 2019 lawsuits that resulted in several multi-million-dollar settlements after these firms denied users free filing for having independent contractor or farm income. They also steered other clients into paid options when they weren't supposed to. So it's just sort of rife with problems. There's also refund anticipation checks where filers want to pay to get their money immediately. They cost $25 to $60 each. In 2019, 265,000 Minnesotans had to pay to get their refund back quicker. These are all just added costs, and they make tax filing harder, and we should do something about it. If there's one maybe small edit or thought I might share in a slightly more critical lens, I think that if we're going to fund a comprehensive study, it'd be interesting to see what in-person or dial-in help centers would cost or how that could be accomplished. The state already funds or provides some funding for VITA sites, where 20,000 Minnesotans filed in 2019, and that could potentially be expanded or part of this idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bernstein. Is there any member discussion or comment? All right, that's easy enough on you, Representative Youakim. Oh, Representative Koznick.
Nah, we don't want to filibuster. We'll let it be. You were planning to filibuster until just now.
Not
trying.
Well, we got a few minutes. If you have any comments or questions, it's always welcome. We encourage free exchange of ideas in the tax committee, as you know.
Just a quick question. I understand the point of the study. Isn't this something that the department should be doing or could be doing anyways?
So you're asking if the department should be just helping people by providing this service to them?
No,
I
guess I should clarify.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to make it easier to file taxes and such and share that information, but.
I can ask Representative Youakim for her opinion on that, certainly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think the department does a lot in trying to make sure that people can access forms, do filings, make sure that they're catching mistakes and helping people correct them versus claiming that they're fraudulent. So I appreciate that about that. Also, this is something extra we're asking them to do. It's really an in-depth study to make sure what it would look like for our state to work with private-public partnership, work with these contractors. We don't want to build our own Intuit software in Minnesota for people to file online. It would be a look at what it would cost us to work with the vendors, give people options for what vendors to use, and see what opportunities are out there, what other states are doing. And I firmly believe in paying people for the work that they're doing, and this is above and beyond what they're already doing. So I think $175,000 is not much for this study.
Representative Koznick, is that good? No. Okay. Oh, Representative Agbache.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Youakim. I just had a general question of the expectations after the study is done. Should this move forward?
Representative Youakim.
Thank you for that question. It's been 6 years since I've been asking for this study, so I think it's morphed over time as well. The expectations would also be to sit down and talk to the vendors that are already providing this service and actually really see what it would take. I like to do studies first before I formulate how to fix something that I see that's out there. I like to hear from the experts. So really taking the study afterwards and doing a deeper dive with members that might be interested, talking to folks at Prepare and Prosper to see how it would interact with the work that they're doing, looking at what we're doing at our VITA sites and see how we can improve on that and see if this is the direction we want to go. It may not be, but we really can't make that decision unless we actually have all the information in front of us.
Representative Agbache? Great. Great. Well, I appreciate that. It sounds like there's maybe some, predatory practices in this industry that we need to kind of look into and make sure that people aren't falling victim to. So I really appreciate this effort. Thank you so much for bringing it forward. And with that, House File 705 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. All right. So members, that brings us to the end of our business for the day. Our next meeting is tomorrow, Wednesday, February 1st. Same time, same place. We'll have a few bills up about construction material sales tax exemptions, everyone's fave. Before we adjourn, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just maybe your thoughts on, I was going to talk to Chair Liz Lagarde about some property taxing, but we are getting more than I've ever seen sales tax LOST requests. Who is kind of, heading that up? Is that the chair, or do you have somebody in mind to kind of look over that?
So we haven't sent those by memo down to the division yet, but I've also, today's the final day for submissions of local option sales tax proposals, and so we'll be in communication moving forward about how what the plan is.
And Madam Chair, they go to Chair Liz Lagarde's committee.
Well, we haven't sent them down yet, so we're figuring it out, and we'll be in communication about it.
Well, Madam Chair, when it comes to Chair Liz Lagarde, I would never say send them down. I would say send them
over. Excuse me, that's right. Lateral moves here. Chair Liz Lagarde.
Madam Chair, that would be send them up north.
Yeah.
That's what we do with all our money in taxes. I don't know if you knew that, Chair Liz or Chair Davids. Thank you. All right, and so yeah, thank you. We'll be in touch. We know there's a growing kind of list there. In that area of our purview here. So with that, we'll see everybody tomorrow, and we are adjourned.